Hey fellow developer, welcome to Frankly Developing and our new code review series. I'm your host Frank, and today I'll look into applying the dependency inversion principle. I'll give you insights into my thought process and how I approach the code. We will continue from the previous video, so if you haven't watched it yet but want to, I'll leave you a card up here. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like if you enjoy this sort of content. But now let's get started. So welcome back to the monster collector, and let's take a look at our list from last time. And we said we wanted to refactor the Cohere manager into some better object-oriented design, make it extensible for other LLMs. So let's take a closer look at this one. We have like the getText method. There's just one usage, which was in the monster part where we generate this name from it. Oh yeah, that was the part that was kind of odd. So that's something we may want to improve on the way. And essentially we're just giving it a prompt, some input, which is kind of the prompt. So what's the difference really? Kind of strange name. And we look at what this input is. It's the list of the names to ignore. So maybe to avoid duplicates or something like that. Okay. How is it using that input? It's like it's an appended user input. Okay. And the other is a system prompt. All right. So let's say we want to stick with this interface. We have a lot of options now to make this extensible for different LLMs, basically. But let's start easy and say like we leave most of this intact and then do one step after another. So as we said in the beginning, we want to apply the dependency inversion. And that means we need to get rid of this static here first and make this a proper object. So to do that, we essentially need this method in a non-static fashion. All this async, it's also a good convention to have this suffix with async, because C# doesn't really tell you about this. Let's see, okay, this is basically redundant. So this is now our instance method. Now we have two usages now, one here, one outside. So to move over to the object, we can change this one. Since we don't have any state, it's good enough for now. Not a final solution, of course. And now this one basically is no longer a public thing, it's really just private, which means we can basically remove it now and have all of this in the other one. Just need async now for the await call. And there we go, now it's done. There's another thing with this valid, so just for consistency. So now it's no longer static, it's a proper object. I commit that. Now let's start with the actual dependency inversion. For that, we want to not depend directly on the Cohere manager. So the dependency now is from this monster class directly to the Cohere manager, and we want to invert that to have like an interface available. Well, for that we need an interface. So let's see. Refactor. We want to extract an interface. And I'm not sure about this validity, so for now, let's just leave it in there. And it's called iCohere manager. Well, since it's supposed to be the extensibility for the LLMs, it's more like an LLM for us. So let's extract that, and we can move it inside file. And now, in order to do the dependency inversion, we want this to depend on the interface. But that means we need to somehow get the interface object in there, the implementing object, which is kind of in a strange place because this is an entity framework class, so we don't really want to mess with that. And instead, maybe think of a different place, like some monster factory kind of thing that creates the monsters and does all this stuff for us. For that, we need to make this method here independent of the monster first and then move it. So how do we make this independent? We would have to declare it static. And now we can see from the compilers the stuff that we need that is not yet there. So we see this is referring to properties of the monster. So we really need a monster in there. Just fix the two places. And give it the monster. And now it's redundant, but that will change since we're going to move the method eventually. So now let's make sure that we can make this static by recurring. So now it should be possible to make this static method. There we are. And now we can introduce a monster factory kind of thing. We can have some kind of create one, where of course we need a monster. And then we want this method in there. Which means we can now copy it over. Very private. Oops. Oh, but we still need this list of ignore names and the custom prompt. There. And then you get back that created monster. Now we want to move all the old code over to use this new monster factory. So let's take a look at these two usages again. This one is pretty easy. And this one is kind of odd because it's looking at this validity of the cohere manager first. And if that is not valid, it's doing it. That's kind of strange, so it's not directly replaceable, but we can think about introducing that to our factory as well. So we have a dependency here to the cohere manager. Well, I could do the same thing here. Now, of course, we changed also the controller, which is something we mentioned in the previous video, that it's kind of bad to have an inconsistency anyways. Now this is also fixed by having it in the same way in both places. And now we can, of course, create this in a different way. Well, let's take a second look again on this monster factory and how far we are. The cohere manager here, we have it down here, so basically we could extract that one, create it in. But actually we already have the interface, so what happens if we just use that one instead? See, oh, that already works. So this one is the concrete usage, this is the interface, and now the variable is really just our, it's kind of strange naming here, but it's just our LLM now, doesn't even have any knowledge of cohere anymore in the rest of this code, other than this initial assignment. Yeah, so when we look at these two usages, the controller should be pretty easy to hook up to the dependency injection. Database context is a bit of a different beast though, because your database context is being used all over the place. Let's see, there's always a new creation of the database context, and something like the initialization of this, well, that's kind of in an odd place here. Don't really want that happening here. So this is something we would like to move out, and also it's not part of the database context for the single responsibility principle reason. Like supposed to work on the database and support these methods. Like, so how can we get this out of the database context? Then add something initially to the program. We build our app. We can have like a function here. Now copying all of this over, import from Monster Factory, and now this last part here, we'll just do directly on this database context. Now this is the database initialization in here, and it's no longer needed to be done in each of the contexts, which means we also don't have to check for the database existence each time. And also remove the initialize monster method. And of course we have to call that once. At this point, it's kind of a lot of stuff going on here in the programs here, so we might want to remove all of this into a separate database initializer. Now we should be almost completely finished here to replace this direct cohere manager with an interface usage. We use it in the database initializer, which we have under control. We have the monster factory under control there. And there is the usage in the monster still. Oh, that's no longer used, so let's get. And since that is all gone, now we have only 2 places where the cohere manager is still being in use. Here we haven't extracted yet, so let's extract it into a field just like we did for the factory. For the final thing, we need to go and take a look at our monster factory. It's still a static dependency. If we want to go through dependency injection, this needs to be a non-static, which basically means we need to remove the static from here. And now we can actually make this a parameter new. So later we can use the dependency injection to go bring it in for us. We only need to adjust the 2 usages, move the dependency out one step. And the same thing for the database initializer. We can do the same thing here. Now we can complete the whole endeavor here by finally setting up the dependency injection here. Okay. We want like a singleton. We want to use LLM, use the cohere manager. We need our factory. Now we can retrieve them. So instead of getting direct access to the manager, we can now use the dependency injection. Say we want to get this LLM service which has been registered in this place, just like in all the other places. So take a look at the remaining usages. This one here uses the factory with the manager. Since the controller, it has access to the dependency injection automatically, so we can directly get the monster factory and just use it. And here we have the monster factory, which we have now moved to the dependency injection, so we really don't want that manually created, so let's also add it. So now when we come back to this cohere manager, as you can see, this is now the only usage. So now we're in a place where, by implementing a new interface, a new class for this interface LLM, we can just replace it here, and that's it. You could go even further and make this dynamic, to load it on demand depending on the API key you have set in your environment, various stuff like that. But basically all you would need to do is create a different implementation class here for the LLM, and it will be used everywhere. That's way easier to replace now. That's also using the standard dependency injection approaches to simplify all of that code. Because as you can see from the LLM usages, there's another little thing here that you could look at, and that is like the database initializer and its use of the monster factory and the LLM, because it seems like you would only need it currently for the monster factory when you generate a monster. You want to call to the AI. So why do you have to do it separately in database initializer? Well, because of this here, it's kind of getting annoyed at you. So like you have to have the API key, which really doesn't matter if you have a monster factory available, right? So that is kind of a place that will most likely go away as well. And this is valid method will pretty much be moved out of this interface as well, probably. Let's just do the final commit. So this concludes our work on the monster collector. And I hope you like this series. It is quite different from the other content in that it's really slow, and I try to speed up some of the aspects that are really straightforward, like the commit message writing and so on. But in general, you can see how things are progressing slowly and slowly. Overall, like, it doesn't take too much time. As you can see, in this short amount of time, we addressed a lot of different problems by cleaning this up. So even if you have like just 1 or 2 hours left at the end of a day, you can do a huge amount of work in that respect. Once you start seeing these things more clearly, it'll streamline your thoughts during the creation already. So for example, once you set this project up like this, you will probably use the dependency injection a lot more already and introduce dependencies like that. You would have much easier time testing things. Of course, in this project, tests have been completely missing, so something that one might want to add in a more production usage kind of scenario. But in general, there's lots of different options to go. And I hope you found it interesting to see how I went on these different options, how I approached them, and what I think is good or not good. And again, this is just a personal opinion. And please keep in mind that none of this is like a final say on how this project should be developed. While I will create a pull request from that, I'm perfectly fine with it being rejected, because you have to match your goal, your vision to all of these refactorings. You can't just refactor just because it looks better. It needs to match your ultimate goal where you want to go. And I have no idea where this project is going. So this is really just a proposal, things to think about. And I hope you have a lot of things to think about as well now. Enjoyed watching it. So thank you very much for watching it. And as always, have fun developing.